plan with that all in there? You're gonna give us kind of a preliminary plan on the 20th, is that what's gonna happen?
Yeah, we'll present some, and you can take a look at it, and make decisions on.
So,
forward.
Mike, I'm hearing you're giving two examples, and one is cutting our public safety, and the other is cutting our cushion.
No, it's,
And I think,
I mean, I guess there's 103,000 on a remodel that we could potentially put back in here, and wait on the remodel.
I'm not really in favor of cutting that 103. I mean, 50 is from this year already, but, so 53 next year. I'm not really in favor of getting rid of that. And I don't think,
Just have to come up with it
taking money from the general fund or from the fund balance for that rainy day fund, I don't think that's a great idea either. It's
back to the drawing
106. Yeah, right. I mean, I think you have to be ready for the future. You don't wanna, I mean, you say, okay, it's easy money, it's easy pickings today to try to get the tax rate lower, but at the same time, we wanna be prepared if things really go south, we need to have that money to try to keep taxes in line in the future, so. And I mean, as far as that suggestion, Travis does a great job, and that police department is probably the most important thing that we do as a city, is to provide that public safety, and I hear where you're going with that, Jeff, but, we've also, that one, I think, is it 137,000, right, is what that position was?
it'd be roughly that,
Roughly,
yeah.
I mean, that's-
It'd be close enough to just use that number, yeah.
And we haven't hired it for the past year, I mean,
Actually, that position was hired 3 weeks ago.
was it?
And then we had another opening from retirement in
Okay.
October, I want to say, the end of October.
So that's the open position actually that you have now, so.
But you're short though, chief.
Correct.
So ultimately, what you're doing is you're working every cop you have to the bone, pretty much.
Yes, and actually, we're getting to that point where we're forcing some overtime.
And then what's gonna happen is cops are gonna start leaving for other cities that have more, I mean, you're just gonna have a revolving door. So again, we're messing with public safety.
Well, but I mean, here's, and like I said, I mean, I think it's most important thing that we do is public safety, is police, and I don't disagree with you at all. But that budget, since 2018 has gone up 2/3. I mean, I think I'd like to see maybe a hiring freeze for right now, for the next 12 months, and take a look at, any department that you have where the budget increases that much over time, we should stop and say, well, hey, what are we getting for those dollar amounts, and I think it's not anything to say, we're not doing it how we should or anything like that, but I think anytime you see that type of an increase, it's something that we should have some concern over. And I didn't feel any less safe in 2018 than I do now, you know what I mean? So it's, and I think it goes to Mr. Duncan's point was, what are we getting for that, and if you can't feel the difference I mean, just to give you an idea of how big that budget has risen to, I mean, we're at over $2 million just for the PD budget, which, I mean, if you're gonna spend money, that's a great place to spend it. I'm not saying that at all, but the whole budget, or the whole general fund levy for 2018 was just a little over 2 million. So, I mean, that's how fast that's growing. And there's other things that are outside of our control. I mean, we had union negotiations that added to the, the cost of employing officers, but we've, I think we really, I know it's tough to do, and it's one, I totally agree with you that it's important to make sure we're having that public safety, but, it's an
look
easy,
at, like,
go ahead.
I respect what you're saying. Then, yeah, also, like we said earlier, we like to look at things not just right in front of us, but how is it gonna be the rest of the year or the rest of the 5 years? We have to consider the amount of overtime we're gonna pay out for one full-time cop not being here. That's something to look at. We
Well, and
wanna see
that's-
those numbers, because someone's gonna have to pick up the retirees' shift.
But
So-
where is that increase in cost coming from, I think, is one thing that maybe we need to take a look at too, is that, I mean, it's gotta be payroll, right? So, I mean, where, are we
Payroll,
overspending on payroll?
computers, any of the technology updates that the PD has had to do in the last 4 years, 5 years, they're not cheap.
They were 10 years behind. I mean, you came in 2019, but you were at the end of 2019, if I recall right?
May of 2019, yes.
So, before that,
Body cameras?
when I took over,
That software?
we
for
were
body cameras?
4 or 5 cops down in 2019.
4.
So we were 4 cops down in 2019. And you, as a resident, nobody sees it. You think, hey, I don't feel any more
Still see-
unsafe than I do
still see
today
the
than I did
scorecard.
then.
Right.
But you didn't know we were 4 cops down. And it was, get the reserves out there, let's give them false perception that there's so many cops. That's what he has to do. And that is absolutely
We used to-
ludicrous.
We used to have a lot of part-time officers that don't
We had
live in the
part-time that was
community.
costing us money, overtime that was costing us money.
Overtime. Yeah, it's just crazy what,
So crazy. I think I've sat down and had many discussions with Mr. Becker, and I'd be the first guy to say if we could cut somewhere, where would it be? Is this frivolous spending? Like I said, if it's amenities, I'm guilty. If it's public safety, I'm guilty.
but it's a tough question, you know?
It's a very
That's
tough
all I'm
question.
saying is, and I'm not saying we shouldn't eventually hire that person. I mean, we've
Right.
got money in the general fund. If we decide to use it,
like,
we
that's why-
can take that 166 that we put aside and we could hire that position still. But I'm just saying,
Roughly, what are we paying in overtime a year for PD right now?
I don't have all those numbers memorized.
I bet we're gonna
What-
come close to that.
What I do know is regardless of what we did or did not pay part-time or overtime or any other payroll other payroll, in 2018, the total actual PD budget was 1.2 million. That included all of the things that we paid for part-time,
I remember when I
overtime,
moved here with, we had
whatever
an
it
old
is.
blue
and what is
Chevy
it?
pickup.
It's projected this year is.
And it's currently budgeted for more than 2 million. I
And some
could
of
not
it
recall
is-
the breakdown between anything, but
Right. Some
in
of it-
aggregate, 1.2 in 2018, 2 million for 2023, more than 2 million.
So over those years, it's, with what Travis has had to
Bringing them up to
improve and
date.
bring in them up to date, that really isn't that big of a change.
And I'm not saying, I mean, Travis, I think, has done a great job. I mean, I'm just saying, you know, and he's just doing what we asked him to, right? So, I mean, we say we want this many on. It's, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with that. All I'm saying is that there's a huge, huge increase there. Maybe we should stop, I mean, if we're looking at budget costs and things, maybe we should stop. Let's say, let's wait to hire. Let's see where that increase is coming from. Is it from, do we have too many squads? I mean, do we have vehicles that aren't being used? Or you know, it may not be the staffing issue, but I'm just saying, we can always hire, we can end that freeze, we can take that away, or we can use that, we don't have to budget for it, we can take that 166 that's in the general fund, I mean, we can move that over and spend that for that. But I'm just saying, let's take a pause and take a look at it.
And just to clarify too, is remember, is things like squad cars, body cameras, these other things that we've listed, remember, those are not in the general fund budget. That's not where those are accounted for. Right, so those are in Fund 920, so when we're talking about 1.2 million in 2018 and 2 million in 2023, those are just basically, we're talking about personnel costs, personnel-related costs, right, like uniforms, that kind of thing, trainings, ongoing subscriptions, right, so we've got LETG and some, some other things, like, so the larger capital items, they're not there. That's not part of those numbers.
Chief, did you pull up some overtime numbers?
Yeah, up until October, I think we're at 80,000 for this year.
80,000 hours? or
$80,000
Okay.
in overtime.
And that's divided over how many guys? I forget.
Well, we'd have that one short, so it'd be 9,
9 guys?
but 80,000 to cover that. That's,
But you're roughly working how much, chief?
I mean, how much is that? How many hours is that?
Yeah. How many hours a week you think an average puts in, or an officer puts in a week?
Depends, average, I mean, they're all pulling an extra shift a week at least.
So I would bet 52 to 60 hours a week these cops are putting in.
Does that seem fair, chief? Is that a good number?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And then part of, as far as the increase from 2018 to 2022, I don't have those numbers in front of me. I presented to all you council our trajectory over that time frame, including even longer that went back as far as calls for service and actually the demand of the police department over those years. And that increase, I'm trying to remember where it was, 2017 or 16, we have doubled that increase. So your calls for service has doubled in 6 years. So should staffing increase, we haven't doubled our staffing. I think our staffing from 2018 till now is 2. We've added 2 positions. That's where a lot of that increase is for the double volume.
We've been playing catch-up since you've been police chief or I've sat in this chair.
Correct. But I mean, that's part of it. You think about the call load, what does the community need for response, for a police officer to do something? You look at the call load as far as how many calls for service, how many ICRs for that year, and that increase, I want to say was 2017 till now would be a double, somewhere in there 2016, 17 to now was a double as far as that call volume. So that's where those 2 officers from 2018 till now are filling that double call volume to have some response to those calls for service. And I think last one, we kind of gave our response times out for the last 2 committees ago. So we went over this response times as far as who we have out there and what the response times for those priority calls.
Which another one that rose in 4 years, I didn't blink an eye. I said, bring it to city council, which we all approved. It was a 3% increase by the fire department even.
3% is a lot different than 67%.
But this police department is, I don't want to say they do a lot more, but, I mean, I see the call volume.
They do a lot more, yeah. No,
I see the call volume versus police and fire. I see both.
Yeah, I'm sure Travis is accurate in that. I'm not saying that he's wrong, or, I'm just saying that we've got tough decisions to make, right?
Absolutely.
Just like Leroy said, he doesn't envy us at all up here, and I'm just saying.
My point is whether it was police,
when our
fire, or
finance
public
director- When our
works,
finance director points out an option, I'm just saying.
I'll leave with saying this. I'll leave with saying this. If it was police, fire, public works, those are 3 people that or 3 departments I would not cut from. Otherwise, I'd find whatever else I could.
Okay, well, let's look at the next thing then. So let's say we leave that where it is for now. The splash pad, I mean, we're talking about $416,000 there, that's city dollars. $218,000 from the capital improvement fund, I think, right, Mike?
Yeah, so it's 436, 218 is from Fund 920, 218 is a transfer for park dedication fees from Fund 214 that would go into Fund 920 to complete our contribution to that.
Say those numbers again, Mike?
218,000 out of Fund 920, and another 218,000 that would come out of Fund 214, which is park dedication fees.
And what did the grant?
That's just city dollars. The grant is on top of that.
300,000.
Yeah, the grant was 300.
We're talking about total project, $736,000, and $300,000 of state dollars, but that's not, just because it's a grant doesn't mean it's free money. I mean, you guys pay state taxes too, right? You know, I mean, it's not free money.
Someone gets that if we don't take it. Another city gets that money.
It's actually federal dollars.
Is it federal? Okay, well,
Yes.
you pay federal taxes too, right? So, you know, I think it's,
It's not free money either way you look at it.
No, but
but so we're talking about just city dollars of 436, and I know Mike and I have talked before about that 218,000 that we're pulling out of park dedication. I mean, that money is for maintenance of parks that we currently have. I mean, that's, you know, I think we talked, you know, that it was, that money, in addition to what's left in that account, would cover us for the next 8 years of planned maintenance on the parks that we have. And so otherwise, we've got to come up with that money from somewhere else. And if we develop, you know, rapidly and we don't add parks, then yeah, maybe we can cover that with that fund. But, you know, and then just as far as that 218,000, you know, I mean, I think, you know, that's just money that we don't really have to spend, and we don't have to levy for it if we don't want to. I mean, I know that, you know, Mike and I have talked about maybe using some of that money for, you know, to go toward that project for the police department, and you know, to finish the new department and the offices there and the build-out. But I think, you know, given the feedback that we've gotten here, I think maybe we ought to just finish that police department a little bit more slowly and, you know, gradually kind of add and I see Travis, I mean, I think we could make that work still and do it at a pace that we can afford a little bit more. But, you know, I think that 218 for sure is what we wouldn't have to levy for, and then we have the money in addition in our park fund for that future maintenance where it should be. So I'd like to see us take that splash pad out completely, and I think that's a big chunk there. Another thing that we haven't talked about yet, well, we kind of mentioned it in passing a little bit, but that pylon sign, or not a pylon sign, excuse me, the dynamic sign, that's $150,000 that we've got budgeted for a big, big sign for the liquor store out on 65. That's all next year, yeah. 75,000 from the liquor fund and 75,000 from the general fund, right, or?
Yeah,
I got
it's
that.
Fund 920, but yeah, the general fund expenditures in there. Yep.
I mean, that's another 150 there that I think, you know, I mean, I'd like to see us have a sign on 65, you know, to pull some of that northbound traffic in, and I think that's probably important, but I don't know that we need $150,000 for a sign, you know, I mean, I think we could probably do, at least cut that in half and still have it, still, yeah.
Do we even have a spot to put it yet?
I think we will, and not that distant future. That was why in the update, I noted that it was pulled forward from 2024 to 2023.
Okay.
Based on discussions with the property owner over there. Seems like a reasonable expectation that a sign could be installed in, you know, probably in the spring, summer at the latest.
So,
And I mean, one thing I'd
that's-
even like to see is let's
could still do a
budget for
sign,
adding the
but-
property this year maybe, and then, you know, get a plan put together for what we need for getting the sign the following year or something like that, and budget for that next year.
what if we still got a sign out there? If we get the property locked up for permission for a sign there, I think that's the most important thing.
I
but
think the property is the most important thing, yeah.
Yeah.
We could put a black sign, you know, like those, oops,
Something.
you know,
on-
black
if we
sign
get
with the lettering on it, I mean, something like that even would do the job
If-
initially.
You know, it's,
Yeah, I think we could, and I think, what were you thinking, 7,000 for the
or
property? was
just
what-
leave can you add the digital part later?
Yeah,
So-
right,
So far,
don't
the
know.
discussions we haven't been as much as we had budgeted, let's say that.
yeah. So, I mean, I think we could get that maybe down to even $10,000 that we put in the budget and probably be safe to add the property and then, you know, do something a little different than a dynamic sign initially anyway. And, so, I mean, there's 140 there, and then you have, you know, I
Was
mean,
it-
you're,
I mean, is it possible to have a sign and just add the dynamic part at a later date?
Well, I mean, once the land acquisition occurs, like, I mean, yeah, you could start with, you know, a standard wood sign saying turn here, right? And then at some point, move on to another item. Then, as far as the budget, remember is that it is currently set for 1/2 through the general fund and 1/2 liquor store. So,
well, but if you don't use it out of the liquor store, that's more you could transfer to the general fund then, right?
well, I mean, there's how you want to do that, right? So if you said, well, I want to reduce the budget on the dynamic sign, well, you can do it
Okay.
halvesies, or you could say this half and, so you could say liquor store is going to maintain their $75,000 contribution, and the other 75 is the amount that would disappear, and we'd simply go forward with what is available, and then that 75,000 out of Fund 920 could come out of the levy if we think that that is a sufficient number.
Because you're saying you're not gonna levy for that 75, but I mean can we lower it even further though than the levy, because we would be able to transfer that 75 from liquor to the, you know what I'm saying?
Well, yeah, but that's already considered. So it's like, unless you're reducing the scope of the project, then yes, then that
Okay.
could work, but we'd,
I think I would be more comfortable with saying, let's get the property now for it for the future, and then next year, if things are going
Is that gonna
well.
be a lease type deal, or
looks like it'd be an easement.
an
is
easement?
the best thought right now. Yeah,
Yes.
on the corner there, purchase for easement.
And then, so
Mine was important
to
to
you. If we did that, say we dropped the levy, 100 grand, how's that gonna affect taxes?
All right, so, I wanna make sure.
What kind of change would somebody see on an average household?
All right, well, I want to keep track of it. So, so you say a drop of 100,000 on, we're talking on the sign?
Yeah.
Okay, so 75,000 out of the total budget would otherwise be levied, and 75 would be collected through sales at the liquor store. So
So we'll
the
just
max
do the
opportunity for levy
75.
reduction would be 75 on that.
On
item.
that.
Yep.
Okay, yep.
Okay. so we can play with numbers. So just that move alone drops us down basically one whole point on the tax rate, and we go from a decrease in the tax rate of 2.3 to a decrease of 4.1. Just on that one. Make sure I entered it right. Just on that one reduction of 75.
Say that again?
So the one reduction of 75,000 to the 920 levy, just that alone, moves us from 57.65 down to, here, actually, no, we don't have it up, down to 56.5, so we're losing basically one whole point there. And then the net change, instead of a decrease of 2.3%, it is 4.11%.
I just think we gotta be more aggressive than that.
Yeah, it's like 75,000. It's not gonna be as very noticeable to taxpayers. Um,
So what, if we make some changes with, let's say we go down to just focusing on getting the property, we budget 10,000 for that purpose and move, so I mean, am I wrong on that if you've got, and maybe you're thinking about something else right now, I don't wanna,
No, go ahead.
okay.
I'm
So
with
if we're moving, let's say we do, keep bumping that. Let's say we split that cost from the liquor store and we do, 5,000 from the liquor store and 5,000 from the general fund for that 10,000, just to make sure we get the property secured up, and then we look at the next year for the sign. We can move that extra 70 then from the liquor store fund that we thought we were gonna spend to the general fund, and that would result in 140 that we can take the levy down?
Yeah, you can do that. There gets to be the question of, if we're gonna have a sign in the future and it would be of a similar, similar stature, right? Then where would the funding come from at that point would be kind of the question.
Right.
Because you're correct in picking out that, reducing the budget item in the liquor fund doesn't change levy at all. It doesn't have any impact unless you reduce it and move it.
Move the right.
Then you have an opportunity to reduce the levy on that.
If we can kind of just play along with me here for a minute, so if we move that 140 out of the levy right now, and then if we put the axe to the splash pad, and I'm not, I like the splash pad idea, my kids would love it, but you're talking about a lot of money that only a small percentage of the people can use, right? So, you've got to have kids in that age range, or you've got to have grandkids in that age range, and if you don't, then maybe you'd rather use that money to take a trip to Florida, or if you do have kids, you buy a sprinkler for the yard, or the world's greatest slip and slide, and my kids would have just as much fun with that as they would with a splash pad. So I like the idea, but I just think the cost and the timing is not right. And so, if we put the axe to that, that's 218 that we can take off of the levy in addition to that 140, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, if we were to do that, and then if we can maybe get a number on that, let's just see how that would make a change there.
Okay, so, all right, so then all right, so we already got the 75 off. Jaden, can we put it back up on the screen? So, because then at least the council, everybody, but at minimum the council can see. this. Here. Is it gonna go now? There we go. Okay. All right, so now Counselor, you guys can actually see what's happening. All right, so capital maintenance levy, can you see the cursor? Yep, all right, so we took the 75 off. We see the reduction down in the tax rate, right? We go down 4.1%. So if we take, if we're gonna take a transfer out of liquor store for their budget item, that would reduce the levy for the general fund 75. And what did we say?
Let's call it 70, right? So so we were
So
looking at 70, so we want to leave 10 for the property acquisition, right? Or for the easement acquisition.
Okay, so then let's make both of those 70. All right, and what else we had here is, all right, and then if we did we're gonna take 218 off of Fund 920. Yeah, and remember here, I mean, we'll look at 2023 column, but recognize that these numbers are auto-generating based on the prior. So we need to go, Fund 920 would need to go back to that level, remember, to cash flow those future items. So we could have that reduction for, all of the reduction in this one budget, or you spread around, but either way, we gotta find our way back to that even cash flow level that won't,
Right. in the
yeah,
future.
so there's, so now there's a,
Right, I
which
mean,
is
it's-
fine, this is a council decision,
Right, I
but
mean,
there's
we're-
then the baked in,
We're putting ourselves in a position where we may not be able to lower it as much next year, but I think,
you would, best way to say is maybe you will have fewer options. They might be great options, they might not be great options, but you will have fewer of them,
right.
so.
So I mean, that got us to 10.95%.
Yeah, so then, that simple understanding on, on a 10.95 decrease, we'll say 11, on 11% decrease in the tax rate. If your property's the same value, city taxes go down 11%. So that, just to clarify the simple understanding.
How much per household would those changes make then for? Plus, I mean, not to mention, not only that, but we're also keeping that money in the park dedication funds where it will go to offset costs in the future too, that we wouldn't have had, that we would have had to try to cover if we
That's-
didn't.
I mean, that park dedication fund is for installing new parks,
Well, right.
adding on to existing
Right.
parks. I mean, that's what it's used for.
Right, but I mean, I know Mike's
You
plan
know.
as far as the maintenance on what we already have, I mean, that helps us cover costs for another 8 years.
To the extent that
Mayor,
we're.
if I may, I believe that our policy, that's written, and some of that's by statute, Ms. Hillsum can say more on it. We're not able to use it on reoccurring maintenance costs, unfortunately. Do you want to touch on that?
Park dedication fees can only be used to improve a park. They can only be used on new amenities. So it can be in an existing park, but new amenities or a new park. So you
Okay.
can't use park dedication fees for just maintenance on things that break or things that need to be replaced. You can't replace anything with park dedication fees. So if a slide goes out and is bad, you can't just buy a new slide. That doesn't count.
Okay. Do you know that, Mike?
And that's by statute, correct?
Yes, it is by state statute.
Just want to make sure it's correct.
That's funny. Well, so Mike and I talked about that earlier today, but that was,
News to me, I figured that if I
News
was
to you
buying
too.
park equipment, that would.
right, okay, all right.
fine.
Well, that's fair enough. So, but, we could put an awfully nice park together, I guess, with that 200 and whatever. And maybe eventually, when that fund gets built up enough, then maybe you'd build the entire splash pad with money like that, I mean, but But, yeah, no, I think if we made those changes and we left, I mean, that way we're not touching public safety or anything like that. But I mean, how much does that translate to per household that we can take off of what they're looking at currently for a bill? I mean,
When, Mayor, if I may, just ask a question, Ms. Hilson, when does that grant need to be expended by if we are to take in those funds?
June 30th of 2024.
so we've got time to use that
So we do have a
grant
year to
still.
push, if we were to eliminate it from this year's budget, to then take a look at the outlook of what the economy is doing or something a year later. Before, if we didn't take action to cut it completely, but just delay it a year. So then staff wouldn't let the DNR know that we're not doing it for 2023, because that would give us another year for consideration.
I also would like to clarify that the dollars for that grant are not taxpayer dollars, they're LawCon dollars, which are land and water conservation dollars, which come from basically receipts from offshore oil drilling. So they're required to pay and put money into a land and conservation thing. So it is not taxpayer dollars.
We just pay for it at the pump then. So I'd still say all dollars are taxpayer dollars. If they're coming from the government, one way or another, I could make the argument that they're taxpayer dollars. But you're not, I mean, I'm sure you're right about that, Stephanie. I'm not trying to give you a hard time. They're all taxpayer dollars. So what does that translate to, Mike? I mean, if you're looking at the savings per household compared to what they've got in their hands right now,
Yeah, that's a difficult question to ask off the cuff, because each one, I couldn't tell you exactly how many households we have. I know, what are we at, roughly 2189 parcels or something like that, but not each of those.
well,
parcels
obviously
will
not
have a
every house is
household.
gonna see the same.
Every household is
yeah,
gonna be a
right, but-
different size, so
and
it's
just
gonna be
say-
a difficult.
Just a
deal.
guess on average, you know, I mean, just your best guess on that. I mean, it's obviously, it's a huge,
Yeah, I mean, just, if they're paying $3,500 right now, what would be, just go off that number, $3,500 is their proposed tax rate.
If I was gonna do, let's see if we can pull.
well, Mike's looking at that. I mean, one thing I would mention too is when we first looked at the splash pad, I think we were talking about something much, much more simple. It was gonna be like $100,000, right? I mean, it wasn't fancy, and I know to get the grant money, we have to have certain things that qualify for the grant, right?
Yep.
But
It isn't
Activities.
just the
Right.
splash pad, it
Right.
is also the restrooms.
restrooms too, right?
So it is the restrooms for the park, which
Right.
currently now
But Ken,
But we were originally gonna put that restrooms off because we didn't necessarily have grant money. I think that was.
you had to have the restrooms to do the splash pad, I think.
No, I think we were gonna do, we were gonna,
get
we
the
were gonna
grant.
put, we were gonna put the, to get the, I'm saying to get the grant, you needed the restrooms. But I'm
But so
saying if
maybe-
we didn't get the grant, we didn't have to do the restrooms.
We could safely say around $200, Mike, by what I'm adding.
At that new rate, you'd be about $788 on a $150,000 home. You know, now that'd have to be after your exclusions and things, but, I mean, so the math isn't quite as simple as one would think it should be, but, yeah, I mean, the difference between a tax rate going down 2.3 and a tax rate going down 11 is substantial. I mean, it is.
Yeah, right,
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it is, so.
So what was your guess on it? You said $150,000 home, it would bring it to $799? And what would it be if we just did,
There
well,
isn't too many $150,000 homes in
not
town.
anymore, no.
No, but
No.
I'm just trying to get a, what did I have before?
But then they would just save more on their taxes then if it was.
Where I was going with that is if that 218 for the park money has to be used on new parks, then we still have that we could say, well, maybe we do want to spend that on a splash pad, and it's still just sitting there. I mean, we could still use that money if it has to be used for that purpose. I mean, maybe we don't do a huge project where we got to pull an extra 200 and some thousand dollars out of the main fund. you
So
know?
rough math between the two is, you know, like on $150,000, which, you know, there are some of those, but maybe not a lot, whatever. But you'd be looking from a difference between 865 down to, 785. So, $80.
And that's, but I mean,
But we gotta
most
be-
of the
you
houses
get-
are probably twice that, so I mean.
Yeah, so
yeah.
then you could understand and extrapolate out roughly twice. Now, there's some homestead value exclusions that are different at higher values, right? The less
Let's say
lucrative, but.
$150 to $250,
but-
you know,
But
give it a
roughly.
range.
Yeah, and then of course, vacant landowner, not gonna notice that type of dollar amount. Somebody in $400,000 home, gonna notice a different dollar amount, so, but
Yeah,
it's not insignificant,
right.
so.
And I guess,
I guess what amazes me is for 3 years, we've talked about this, and nobody's ever said a word, including you, except for, I'm against it. But you never said why. You never broke it down like this. You never dug into it. You just, I'm against it.
I don't think that's fair. I think.
That's
I think-
100%
I don't think that's fair at all. I think Jimmy,
If I would have seen numbers like this, I think I'd have been blown out of my sneakers, Councilman Burgley.
well,
I'm not good at math. I'm the first one to admit it. Nor do I talk out of order in a council meeting. So January is your time. And until then, sit quietly in here, please, unless you're up here. Or I'll call you out of order and you'll be removed. Doesn't matter. I'm tired of that. If we'd have broke it down like this, Councilman Gordon, you would open my eyes. I'm horrible at math. Never said I was a genius at math. I totally leaned on him. Not saying this is his fault either, but if this was broken down like this, you'd have had a bazillion questions for me to ask him.
I mean, I've been saying for years, I've never wavered from where I stand on spending and keeping government small and limited in every capacity of what we deal with, and I've never wavered from that. And so, yeah, maybe we haven't broke it down like this before, but it hasn't come to a head before until now, so.
You could have brought it up at any time.
Today is the day for making the decision, so that's why it's coming to a head, and that's why we're having this discussion. But
You could have brought it up at any time, though. And I've always let everybody speak up here. You would have spoke, we'd have broke it down like this. This wouldn't even, we wouldn't even went into that grant. It would have probably never been done.
I mean,
This would have never been an idea. This would have been passed because I would have seen it broke down like this.
like I said, when the project was first brought about, it was gonna be $100,000 for a small, simple splash pad. And then it grew and it grew and it grew and it grew, which it always does. I mean, I think we've got a lot of people here clamoring for something different and for us to
Like to
do
see
it.
more.
They'd like to see more. I know it's not enough.
No, I
it's-
mean, more people
Oh,
show
yeah,
up.
This is,
Tonight.
this is
was
essentially
nice.
12 people out of
This is the
6,000
most I've
residents.
seen.
Are
up
you
here
saying that it
for
doesn't,
this
that
meeting.
they're coming here doesn't, I mean, think about, when was the last time you had that many people show up for a meeting? For even a tax meeting?
annexation.
Yeah, sure, annexation, yeah. So, I mean, this is a huge crowd compared to what we normally have. I mean, usually it's about 2 or 3 people here and here, and they're usually here because they have something that they want to get done or get approved. So to belittle them coming in here and saying they're 12 people.
Ain't nobody
it's
belittling
12 people is an awful lot of
That's
people.
why I said I wish there were more,
Yeah,
but
this-
showing up
right.
tonight was awesome.
Right,
Agreed.
and it's
And I'm
important.
not
I mean-
belittling anybody.
No, but I mean, it makes a huge difference when people come in and they show their frustration with things and they ask good
Well,
questions.
sometimes a lot of our projects, we don't hear anything, so we
Right.
feel that
Nothing.
they're being taken well by the public. Yeah.
You can step up, state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jeff Holmgren, 508 Parkbrook Road, Northwest. I think the city has an issue with getting the information out of City Hall and into the public domain, into the residential homes for projects like that. I would like to see every one of these projects put on the ballot, at minimum, so everybody knows what they're voting for. Because you can easily pass these projects in here, and people are out and about, working, doing their regular jobs.
But correct me if I'm wrong, we did try that, and we found out we couldn't put it on the ballot.
Yeah, it has to increase the levy in
Correct.
order to be on the ballot. So that's, if
But
we're
you
lowering
can
the
send
levy,
a
then you
letter.
can't, you definitely can
send a
communicate
letter
better.
to every
Yeah.
address,
We
get on
did,
social media.
We did that.
We, yeah.
I
And
never received anything, but that could be on me. I'm just saying, there's an information blockage from inside here to out into the city.
I agree
That's
with
what
you.
I see.
Yep.
And so.
We've had that conversation up here before.
We have.
That's when I brought up trying to put, like, on your water bill,
Yep.
little informal notes on there, because everybody's gonna get one.
So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me.
We've had that discussion.
That there's a lot of irritated people with how much the increase is. And of course, you gotta educate the public on how it's all broke down and all that. But it does not surprise me that you have a lot of people here irritated with that big of an increase. You've gotta stop some of these projects. You don't need to go after public safety. This splash pad is easy. This is an easy cut. It's the wrong time. I'm not saying it's the wrong idea, it's the wrong time. Let the grant go somewhere else. That's all I'm saying.
Step forward, state your name and address for the record again, sir.
Al Garber, 1223 Blossom Boulevard. I would like you to think carefully when you, some of these ideas to reduce the budget, I heard, well, it's only 50,000, or it's only, I would like you to think that that's the way the money is spent. Some here, some there, some here, some there. I would also like you to think about, I think it's a natural thing for government to want to grow. It's not bad intentions, it's good intentions. But I think a lot of us are at the point now where we're really asking you, don't make it bigger. It's not the right time to make it bigger. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. This was broke down like this. 2 years ago, this would have been dead.
Well, I'd make a motion that we, I mean, I guess we need to kind of approve it, and I'd like to see us go with this, with these changes, I guess, and
Could you summarize them in one more time?
Yeah, let's clarify what
well,
changes
so
you want.
the changes
and
I'd
I'll
like
help
to
walk
see
through
is let's, instead of taking 75 and 75 from liquor and from 920, let's take 5 from each, so that we have a budget for securing that easement, at least for now. And then we can see how we want to approach the sign going forward. And then I'd like to get the splash pad put on hold for now, and we can, take a look here this coming year. Maybe that's something we can talk about at goal setting as a smaller project that's using those park dedication funds that we have to use for something new. Maybe we find a way to still incorporate some of the grant money and some of the park money and still get something done that's on a smaller scale, that's more manageable and less costly to maintain. And that'll get us that 218 that we don't have to levy. And then, I guess I didn't say that part, but move that 70 from the liquor that we planned on spending on the sign to the general fund, so that also,
I've
so
got
we
that
have
on the list.
140 there that's off the levy from that sign, and 218 off the levy from the splash pad.
358,000 is what you're proposing.
Right. No, go.
Yes, come on up. State your name and address for the record, please.
Nick Izzo, 1107 Maplewood Avenue. The decision, whatever the decision, it sounds like we're leaning towards a decision here. Whatever that decision is, you need to understand that the community is expecting a splash pad. That's been communicated, okay? If that decision is reversed, and I'm not here to tell you one way or the other.
For how many years,
But-
though, as you heard this community say that they wanted?
20, I'm sorry?
This splash pad, how many years have you heard the community say they
Been
wanted
here
it?
20 years, and it's been a long time. My point is, you
When is the
have
right
to,
time
hold on,
ever gonna be?
you have to communicate this the right way to the community. This has to be communicated correctly, because this doesn't represent the whole of our community.
Right.
And I think we can all agree on that. We have a lot of youngsters, a lot of young families. We have a growing community, and you may or may not know, I'm very involved in our school district. We have quite a few young families joining our community, okay? This has to be communicated the right way if this is the decision you're going with, okay? I would represent those that are in favor of a splash pad.
Well, and I think maybe what we should do is just change the budget for the splash pad to be only those park dedication funds. And see, that was news to both Mike and I, that we have to use that money for that purpose. So if we have to use it for new parks, then why not, use that 218, and then we'll come up with a plan that better suits, it doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal of splash pads.
Because we wouldn't get
Right.
that grant if we used 218, right?
No, we would, I think, it just has to
You have
include
to-
certain things that
They're
make the
looking
grant qualify.
For,
Mayor, one thing I would like to mention, and we have done this before in the city, I'm not saying that this is what we should do in this instance, but just another option. We have borrowed against the Park Dedication Fund balance, and it's gone into the negative, and then once it got replenished with development, whether we got a housing development, or we got business, or we got an apartment, or something like that, as it's been replenished, it can pay back that, so to say, borrowed out money, if that's something that is of interest. Now, we don't know when that'll come. Sometimes that's years, and it sits in the negative for years, but
And I
that
don't
is an
know-
option.
If we have that money that's sitting in that fund already, does it really have to be budgeted? I guess that's a question
So,
for you, 'cause it's
so
already there,
special,
right?
special revenue funds like 214, which is the park dedication fees, are non-budgeted, right? That's a statewide arrangement. Now, what maybe is worth noting here is that while we were gonna pull 218 out of the park dedication
350
funds,
really available, right?
there's 350 in there. So if we like Josie's
You
idea,
thought we were gonna use it for future maintenance, so
Well-
now we don't really have a purpose for that rest of that money either, do we?
yeah, and the other stuff is already understood to be taken care of anyway, so that ends up being a wash anyway. But, so if we take with that idea, you're going negative 86,000. And you can say we don't need 218 out of Fund 920.
And the reason why you have to show, though, that money would be put over there and going into the hole and in Park Dedication Fund is because the grant is a matching grant. You have to show you have funds there. So that's what Mike is pulling those numbers for, to show that matching grant to receive those $300,000. But I have seen it done before, it going to the negative on the Park
It was,
Dedication
it
Fund.
was, it was negative when I think it was negative when I got here for my first year and a half, yeah, at least, yeah.
I don't know if people, the park dedication fund is roughly $1,500 per new parcel that's built is dedicated to that fund, right?
some, yeah.
1,800, yeah, is it?
Go ahead,
So
Mr.
This
Izzo.
is, it's a critical time in our community with a changeover in leadership. And what is gonna be remembered is what happens in the next few months. And the community is gonna hear there's no splash pad, and we have a new mayor, and there's gonna be fingers being pointed. So I just want you to be very careful that you're communicating this the right way, if this is the council's decision, because it's gonna lead to talk throughout the town.
What's I said earlier, you please one person, you don't please a different,
Yeah, that's for sure.
you
yeah.
can't win. But
You're damned
we
if
have
you
to
do and
look at
damned if you
the
don't.
majority of the community, what the majority wants, and really, that's what,
Well, I think
we need
that
to
really is a game changer to know that we can't use that money for park maintenance. That really does change a lot of what I came into this meeting thinking about, and I think Mike, it did for you too, so. I think, and Nick, I think you make a lot of excellent points there too. I think people want, I don't think people, but it's also, we gotta make those hard decisions, right? So if we don't, it still saves us that 218 if we just say, okay, that 350 we've got in the park fund can be used towards that splash pad. We could probably do both, actually. Now that we know kind of that has to be set aside for that, right? So, we could say, let's do the splash pad for 350 instead of 436. It might not, go ahead.
I'd also like to add that there are other fundraising opportunities to raise the balance
Sure.
amount. So it doesn't even necessarily mean that we'd have to reduce that, and with the way prices continue to increase, there's a likelihood that what we thought we were gonna get a year ago is not gonna be affordable now. And the DNR is aware of that project's changed, so. But I do think there's other fundraising opportunities that we can also look towards.
Sure.
And I'd like to add one more thing, not to get off on a tangent, but it really is important, as many people have mentioned, is those ancillary things that happen when we get a development coming in and we think of like, oh, here's what we can use park dedication funds. We don't want to accept their outlot as green space, because then that gives us zero money. They give that to us in lieu of park dedication funds to use for amenities differently. So when we look at when we're taking in projects and things like that, it all works together as a puzzle of how it can affect other projects. So I just want to make that point.
And to add to that is that those are things that make young families move here. So we are seeing our housing developments grow because of that. I actually heard recently from somebody who moved here because of that the Bluebird Park area and the complex is amazing, and that's why they like to live here, so.
And like I said,
Thank you.
my,
I just say,
go ahead.
just, you have to identify how you're going to communicate this to our community, whatever decision is made, so thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Gordon, I like the idea of where we go back to the bare minimum, you know. like
Well, I
you
mean, I
said.
think if we have the money.
park
that
dedication fund.
money, I mean,
Why wouldn't we save that for something else? Why do, just because we have it, do we have to burn it?
because I,
You don't have to burn it. It's just a way to drop the levy and still try and make more people happy with their decision.
Well, I don't think I think a splash pad's gonna make people happy. I don't think it has to be a $400,000.
well, and we don't necessarily have the plans yet for the splash pad, we just have the budget to
We
make
have
the
a-
plans, so if we say.
We have a
it's-
concept,
Right.
basically.
But if we have 350 available in that park dedication money that has to be used on new parks, so that's what Mike and I both thought, it had to be used, it could be used for maintenance. Well, if it can't, it's money that we can use for new amenities like that. So if that's what it's there for and it's available, then, you know, I think we should probably utilize it. But if we can do that and still drop that 218,000 out of the levy, so we're still getting the decrease that we talked about and the splash pad, that's pretty good.
Jason Burke, 208 Richard Avenue again. I want to make sure that you guys are aware, I appreciate all you guys. So if I came up here earlier and was just acting like a goofball, no, I appreciate you. But I want to make a point to what was brought up. You know, everyone's expecting this splash pad. You know, that's the way we get in when these governments are paying for everything. Everyone wants it, and I totally understand. I'd want it too. But they don't realize where the money comes from. So once again, we're raising taxes. These people are all excited about it, but they don't realize that their taxes are going up. Well, when they do realize it, I guess I can say 95% of the people, the congregation, or the Cape County Township, you guys, you don't want your taxes going up. I guarantee you that. Even though you want the splash pad, you don't want your taxes going up. So I would encourage you guys to look at the overall, what we're really looking for. I mean, people don't understand where this money comes from. I appreciate your time.
Well, Leroy Johnson had a good point. Do we, you know, that the price always goes up? Do we
Right,
know- Do we
and the
know,
maintenance.
do we know the maintenance and?
Right.
Well, everything, say we wanted, if, you know, if we put the splash pad, just use it as an example, or any major project, if we put it off, a simple purchase, squad car, you know, 5 years ago, they were 50 grand outfitted. Today, they're probably 80 grand outfitted. So if, that's one thing that can come and bite you, just like at home. I'm not gonna do the roof this year, I'll do the roof next year, or 2 years down the road.
Oh, it's gonna cost you $2 more grand.
No, it's
It's
gonna
gonna
cost
cost you
more.
more. Either way, it's the point. I see what you're saying.
And that's the way it is, and it's really bad right now, but, you know, people like you guys don't get to see that benefit of that cost going up on a product that you're making and selling, you know, because your costs are going up to make that product, or, what, you know, it's just a crappy deal. So,
I wish we would've broke it down 2 years ago like this.
but we're doing it now. It's better to do it now than,
I'm Elaine Fisher, I live at 508 Main Street West here in Isanti. I guess I would like to know what you're looking at for amenities 20 years down the road. If we're planning out that far, what's gonna hit us taxpayers next? You know, it's been repeatedly one thing after another now. So what other things have you not told us that you're looking at in your plan? If you have that so-called plan.
You'd have to come to goal settings. Every year, the city council has goal settings. And that pretty much lays every thought
but that's
or
the long,
plan.
yeah, but the long stuff is what you're referring to isn't amenities. It's
Street maintenance.
street maintenance, road construction, equipment, purchases like that. A lot of that is, but the goal setting session, like you said, would be where we set goals for the year out to 5 years or whatever. Those
Which is
are-
the end of January,
Those
right?
those meetings are gonna be where you're gonna find out more about amenities,
January
the special
31st
things.
At 5 PM, 5:30 PM.
So January 31st, you can come in here and,
But to answer your question.
That's right, you'll be in Texas.
There's not, the goal setting really only looks at 1 year at a time, essentially. I mean, maybe a couple of years down the road, but.
It's 1
there's
year at a
nothing-
time.
There's nothing like what Dan was saying. I mean, there are no amenities like a splash pad planned for the future in advance or anything. But, and what he's, you know, what, we have a water treatment plant in 2040, I think that's a huge expense. You know, I mean, those types of things are what's planned out. And then usually the smaller amenity kind of things are more just what your current leadership is kind of wanting to do. And so that's where a lot of that stuff will end up coming from, but.
We get feedback from the public too. You got feedback about an archery range, you know, and I got feedback for years for getting a sledding hill here, just so we don't have to drive all the way to Cambridge with the kids, you know. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that we get feedback from the public, and then we take the idea and try and run with it the best we can.
oh,
That's kinda-
we bring it here and the 4 or
Yep.
5 of us discuss it.
Yep.
It's not,
But
nothing to do
it's-
with current leadership.
No,
It's a team
the-
effort.
Right,
Yeah,
it is,
the
but he
council-
meant
the
the
council as a
current.
whole is what I mean as
Yeah,
current leadership,
I
yeah.
knew what you meant, but, yeah, so, but, yeah, those are the things that you're probably referring to, which is set. And some of those goals are on there for 3, 4 years.
Yeah,
It
some
never
of them are
happened.
Longer, yeah, right.
It never happened, yeah.
So,
Well, I mean, I guess, Nick, that was a great point. I mean, that, if we have that money, why not still use it for something that people are expecting us to do and something that they've been told is gonna come, so. I mean, I think we don't really need to necessarily put that in the budget, right, because we have the money, but, you know, if we say, okay, we're gonna look at that splash pad and we're gonna limit ourselves to what's available in the money that's already set aside from that park dedication fund. And that's not, Jason, that's not tax dollars, that's, I mean, it is in a sense, because when the developer puts a property together, they're gonna pass that cost along to the person that's buying it, so I mean, it's eventually gonna be passed along to a resident, right? But I mean, it's more the developer, when they put that property together, they're paying that
It's-
1,800 into
yeah.
that fund to do that, but, so I mean, if we have that available, let's plan on using that 350-ish or so to do the splash pad.
Yeah, in that scenario, whether you're gonna take the full 350 or we're gonna say, all right, we wanna get to that 436, and you wanna
Sure.
spend down another 86 out of that and wait for it to fill back up. In either scenario, as a special revenue fund, that doesn't need to be budgeted. We would just be representing to the state that we have the funding available to utilize,
Right.
is how that would go.
So we can
So
still.
in that scenario, the only change here is a reduction in the 920 levy, basically to put the
218.
money back. And it'd be a
Right.
question of, do you do it all now, or do you do it over 2 years, or whatever
Right.
the council would want to do on that, but
So I mean, I guess that would be what I'd like to see us do, is say, let's use the park dedication funds, and we can look at how that's spent and how we manage that, you know, this coming year at goal setting to get the splash pad done. So we're still gonna do the splash pad, but then let's cut that 218 out of 920 as far as spending. I'd like to see us just put it all towards this year and, you know.
And the 140.
And the 140, right, and then look at, you know, maybe getting a sign the following year, you know, see how, and, you know, just see how that goes, I guess, and see what we, you know, want to spend then, but, you know, I think if we can make that change, I mean, that's, I know it's not, you know, as much as maybe people are hoping for, but it's at least a step in the right
compromise.
direction. It's a compromise, and we still can get the
And it's-
splash pad done, and we can still lower the tax rate.
So you've made that a motion, Councilman Gordon?
I'll make that a motion. I don't know, how do you want to do that, Mike?
The motion is to cut the 218 from 920, right, Mike?
Yeah, I'm just looking through to see if we need to double check anything. I don't need that, don't need that.
And we're cutting
At this
140,000 as well from, that'd be from,
Let's
Well, you're
just-
cutting-
Okay, let's do it this way. With the understanding that, I'm gonna just announce, right, so everybody's super clear. We are going to reduce the levy in 920 by 70,000 for 1/2 of the dynamic sign. Other 70,000 will now become, as part of the budget, a transfer from 609 to the general fund 101. That will have a corresponding levy reduction, okay? Then the final item would be a reduction of 218,000 in Fund 920 as well for the splash pad portion,
So it's,
correct? So if we all agree on that, what I'll have to do then is come back and rewrite the budget resolutions as they are, and we'll get those signed, you know, either today, tomorrow, whatever, but so long as we're all clear that those are the changes that would apply to the resolutions that are in front of you, then we can proceed. And at that point, you would either go one by one or just all, what do we got, 4? 1, 2, 3, you would just say.
4.
All 4 with the noted changes.
what was, you said the 142 is in that?
Well,
Yeah,
that's
the
Mike was-
dynamic
Yeah,
sign.
the 70 from 920, the
70.
70
Gotcha.
from the liquor store transferred over,
Yeah.
Yep.
yep, and then
So,
the
and
218.
even, let's be even more clear, to represent on the screen, we're talking about general fund levy being reduced by 70,000 from what's in front of you, right? Okay, so we can see it on the screen. We're reducing by 70,000 that one, and we're going to take the original amount of 465 and change, and then Fund 9, we're gonna reduce by 70,000, and then reduce further by 218. Correct? I mean, we want to be super clear that nobody has misunderstood how
I
we
think it's
would
good.
proceed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we're still gonna get that splash pad done, we're just gonna use that park
General
dedication
park
money.
dedication.
We can use the park dedication funds that don't have another viable use
Right.
regardless. Okay,
And to be clear though, as well with that splash pad, so, and this will all be vetted out next year as we go through the project, it will likely be at a smaller caliper because we are working with less funds that the city was contributing to the overall project, just so everyone's clear with this change.
But it's still gonna be potentially.
Still gonna be a pretty good
You could-
splash pad.
Well, and you can also do it on a smaller scale, but have the, I mean,
You can always grow or add to it.
you can
Well,
always
right.
add to it.
And we're still gonna use, if we wanna use that grant money, we can still get access to that as long as we do the things that qualify for that, but yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll still be a pretty awesome splash pad with that much
Just
money.
want to make
I
sure
think.
everyone's
Yeah,
aware
right.
that that does change. Maybe if someone was looking at what was presented in a packet earlier on, it will change that a little bit. Those will all come back through council, but just so everyone's aware.
Well, I think we're gonna make a motion now. so-
Yeah,
Yeah,
what
so-
motion we're making.
so if everybody's, yeah, so and everybody nodded, we understand what we're changing in the levy and what is gonna change on the general fund budget, right, with the additional transfer in from 609. And if that is, everybody is on board with that, we can go through those 4 resolutions in order as they're listed on the agenda, or simply motion to approve all 4
So if
I motion to approve all 4 of those
with the noted changes.
with the noted changes that Councilman Gordon went over so well.
I'll second that.
I have a motion to approve all budget items with the noted changes by Councilman Burgley and seconded by Councilman Gordon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. We have the consent agenda. What is the designating poll places in the city of Isani?
We are required to state where the poll places are every year.
Oh, so they're not changing, you're just,
Nope, they're not
Oh,
changing, but we
okay.
do have to state that by resolution every year.
okay. Anything else in there we need to talk about, or do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve?
Second.
Motion to approve by Councilman Collison and a second by Councilman Burgley. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn by Councilman Burgley. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Second by Councilman Gordon. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 4-0. Therefore, we stand adjourned.
I'd like to thank